I am Katie Hall, co-founder of Katie Hall Foundation and one of the producers of Black Women Mental Health Series. On March the 22nd, 2022, Katie Hall Foundation joined forces with the Washington State Women's Commission and the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle with the support from the Group Health Foundation to hold intimate conversations about mental health. We convened at the WOW Gallery and home to the iconic Dear Sister, I See You exhibit. We brought together a dynamic group of Black women leaders for a candid conversation around the topic of Black women and our mental health. Our panelists shared their mental health journeys, discussed the need to destigmatize depression, mental health crises, and dismantle the trope of the strong Black woman. We discussed the realities and impact of racial and gender-based trauma and called for systemic and cultural changes necessary to normalize accessing support and to promote healing and holistic well-being. Our goal for this docuseries is to normalize conversations about mental health. Our collective call to action is to urge you to prioritize your mental health, make you aware of resources that are available to you now. Our hope is that these stories will empower you and, if necessary, allow you to acknowledge your need and to ultimately connect you to resources for you to seek help. The conversation around mental health has been pushed aside for many years, especially in the Black community. It has been looked at as taboo, but now it is even more critical, especially in the aftermath of COVID-19 and the racial reckoning that has followed. Our leaders unpacked the stigma, language, and intergenerational trauma. They had shared reasons that have prevented many of us from seeking support, offer hope and community to each other, and we even shared tears. I was moved to action around mental health after learning about the tragic death of 30-year-old and former Miss USA Chelsea Kryst, who died by suicide. From the outside, this brilliant and beautiful woman had it all: a loving family and close circle of friends, a business degree from University of South Carolina, an accomplished Division I track and field athlete and fitness enthusiast, an MBA and a law degree from Wake Forest University. She was a licensed attorney focused on social justice, a musician, a fashion designer, and an Emmy-nominated TV host on Extra. A year prior to her death, Chelsea wrote candidly in an essay for Allure magazine about overcoming the crushing expectations she placed on herself after she nearly worked herself to death. The main question Chelsea asked herself: why am I working so hard to capture the dreams I've been taught by society to want when I continue to only find emptiness? She said, emptiness. Do you feel it? How about exhausted, a void, hollowness, or worthlessness? Do you overcompensate? Do you allow yourself to truly rest? You are not alone. This conversation around mental health provided our group of exceptional women with a platform to redefine the Black women we are, the Black women we are becoming, and the Black women that we are raising. To reframe the definition of strength, not as someone who powers through, but someone with the ability to be vulnerable and to trust and motivate us to show up for one another in community and solidarity, even in the face of healthcare systems that continue to fail Black women. You are not alone. You are seen. You are an extraordinary spirit. I see the power within you. You are beautiful just the way that you are. We collectively see your brilliance and invite you to join us on a journey to start the healing. I'm Katie Hall, and I look forward to connecting with you throughout this docuseries.
Welcome to WOW Gallery, where we have chosen to, in the context and framework of love, light, and liberation, place our feet, our heels on the ground to say, Black love is our radical protest. There's a time for glass and there's a time for protesting, and there are all kinds of different ways to protest. And what we are saying is healing, 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 healing mentally, spiritually, physically, financially, sexually. What? All of those areas of healing is a critical necessity in the conversation of race and justice. It is critical to that conversation. And if we don't have that conversation, we are not having a conversation.
Hi, and I'm Regina Malvo, Director of the Washington State Women's Commission. We are an office of the governor, and we exist to advise the governor and the legislature on issues that disproportionately impact women.
And just what I thought was really important is that right now, in this moment, we are making history. We talk a lot about our ancestors and people in the past, but we're making history tonight. And we don't know if this is going to ever happen again. And it was very important to me. The only thing I said, Regina, the only thing I want to say is that we have a Black woman as our chair of the Washington State's Women Commission, and we have you as our executive director. That's huge, and that is history. And we don't know if that's going to happen again. But while it's here right now, you all are opening up doors for all of us, and I just personally want to thank you all, like sincerely. And to have
Actually, there are so many thoughts that when you ask that question, and when I thought about this throughout my career in healthcare, and one of the stigmas that come to mind from a personal experience is that fear of vulnerability, that fear that I personally, as a Black woman, that I would not be strong enough, that I'm not strong enough, that place of insecurity, and also being afraid to really voice those inner feelings, because then would I be able to compartmentalize those feelings to continue to move forward and overcome any obstacles that come my way. I also think within our existing structure, there's a power structure and a power dynamic, and from a generational perspective, that impacts our ability to really reach out.
I certainly think back to when I was younger and having folks in my family that we would label as, oh, that's crazy auntie or uncle, and being older now and realizing how we failed to just normalize struggling with mental illness or having a mental illness, struggling with our mental and behavioral health, and thinking how far the conversation has come now to have language where it's like you don't loosely use the word crazy or, wild, or just different words that we call people who we see struggling and we're not helping. But I think a lot of it has to do with how we are taught when we are younger, and not having the language to describe those struggles that we clearly observed in our families and in our family members. And until we do that, until we continue to educate ourselves and give ourselves new language and understand that, like, our physical health, our mental health is critically important, and we do need to take care of it. We do need to make sure that we have tools and resources to help us to have a very healthy mental health. So once we arrive there as a society and normalize talking about the things that we're thinking about and the ways that we're struggling with our thoughts and our behavior, we'll continue to, I think, let folks down. But once we grasp that, once we do a better job naming it and talking about it and recognizing that we all have to deal with our mental health, and it's not because something is wrong with someone, but it is literally a part of our biological evolution. I think we'll get there, but we just have a little way to go to normalize those conversations.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, I was always taught to just suck it up. You're good. Just keep going. You slip and fall. Don't cry. You haven't, you got in a fight with your friend. You're all right. It was just keep it pushing. Don't show anger, fear, hurt, nothing. Just keep going. Don't be anything but happy. And just keep it on. Keep it on. I remember even, and I'll get to my next question, even at my grandmother's funeral, her children did not cry because she taught them not to cry, right? And it was the day she was being buried. I was like, this makes no sense. But it was ingrained in us probably long before our grandmothers and grandparents.
Well, let me jump in here.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that we have to look at historically is that, we are the caregivers, not only for our own family unit. So imagine if you are the caregiver in the family for your own children, but then if historically we're steered into the role as a maid or a housekeeper or whatever, we're the caregiver of the white children, of the master's children. And so our feelings, no one is showing up for us when we are vulnerable and when we need help. And that generationally comes down over and over. And then when we have the revolution around, psychiatry and mental health resources, it shows up in a white space where then do we trust the woman who, or historically it's been women who have been counselors. Do we trust the white woman to provide us counseling about things that they may not have any understanding of, like the duality that we face as not only women but Black women at that? And so learning how to trust ourselves first, then let someone from an outside of the group to guide us through some of the challenges. Professionally it's a challenge. And so that's the thing that how do we show up for each other? How do we ensure that the profession is regarded in with the highest regard, to know that we have resources out there that we can trust? Because how can we trust something that has not been there for us, that does not allow us to have that vulnerability?
By doing this, by having conversations like this, by normalizing it, by talking to others and saying, hey, I'm stressed, or I suffered from depression, or I experienced this, or I'm grieving, the more we have these conversations, the more we know we're not alone. And as we're talking about tools, so we have to adjust our own tools introspectively as how we've dealt with our mental health based on how our mom dealt with it, grandmother, her mother, so on and so forth. And we have to look at the history, because when it comes to the mental health field, it was literally a mental illness for slaves who ran away, drapetomania. And when you were shown to show any sign of depression or crying, the slave master would literally beat you. And then what happened? Slavery ended, and then in our households, we often say, oh, shut up or I'm gonna give you something to cry about. That literally came from that history of the slave master who was beating us because we couldn't show any sign of emotion. We were literally watching our brothers and sisters be lynched.
Yeah, that reminds me so much of just summer 2020 and how many people suddenly were like, hey, I realized that you're Black. How are you?
That's racial trauma.
Yeah. And I felt so grateful to work at the Urban League and get to show up every day to a staff full of Black people and not have to explain anything, because that can be very burdensome too, constantly explaining and explaining and explaining. And then like the microaggressions that you're talking about, it can feel like the ultimate gaslighting, where it's like, did that just happen? Did she just say that? Like, and then constantly second guessing like what my experience is. And so being in a space, hearing you express what racial trauma is, it's really validating. So thank you for that.